Hello, hello, hello. Well, welcome to this week's Genius Zone. And boy, have we got a treat for you. Ladies, have you ever wondered about your body and the way that it changes through menopause and the way that you may go into what you believe is a menopausal phase where suddenly your whole sexuality switches off? I know a lot of ladies have come to me about this. However, I have a woman who knows so deeply on this powerful and profound topic. She is not only a pelvic health coach for women's sexuality, bringing that sexy back into menopause, but she is a physiotherapist, she is an author, she is a keynote speaker. She is the woman that is about to really come up with some confronting subjects that you may have been hiding for a very long time. So she has brought that sexy back into people's relationships. She has been able to help women reclaim their sensuality and divine connection. And guess what? She has a supernatural ability to help you to tap into your supernatural power through the Holy Spirit. So with no further ado, I bring on the wonderful, the brave, and the incredible Lisa Fitzpatrick. How are you today, Lisa?
I'm really excited. Thanks, Terri.
That is so good because I am too. So we are about to broach a very, very brave subject because a lot of women don't want to talk about this. This is kind of like swept under the carpet. But let's start from the very beginning, okay? Because along the lines here, we are going to bring into it one of the divine spiritual aspects that you know very well about, and I know very well about too. That is like the secret ingredient of the Holy Spirit. Now, I'm going to ask you to describe firstly, for people that may not even know what the Holy Spirit is, I'm going to get you to open that up so we can firstly talk about something that you're going to bring into the topic as a supernatural power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the very first thing is thank you so much for letting me have this conversation so openly, because I believe that every single one of us has the capacity to understand the Holy Spirit better if we are not seeing it as something separated from ourselves. So the Holy Spirit is a very gentle, nourishing, unable to be manipulated aspect of our existence and of our being that we are able to invite into our lives to assist us as humans. And the interesting thing about the Holy Spirit is that the Holy Spirit wants to tend to us and befriend us and support us in our times of need and in our times of brokenness. And it does not require us to be perfect and put together and polished. It doesn't require us to know what to say. It accepts us unconditionally. But the important thing for us to realize is that it's never going to invite itself in. So there might be parts of us that secretly feel ashamed of our brokenness. We might feel as though we're not necessarily showing up in our life to our full potential. We might be harboring fear and anxieties and depression and traumas. And we might also be getting to a point where we've tried a lot of therapies and a lot of things that haven't worked for us in our lives, yeah? And the Holy Spirit is one of those aspects to our existence that has the potential to befriend and support any person, no matter what the depth and the breadth of your trauma actually is. The prerequisite for us to actually have the relationship that we need to foster and support and tend to, in order to create a connection to the Holy Spirit that really changes things in our world, is one of deep, deep intimacy. So what is required for intimacy is for us to invite the Holy Spirit in fully, is for our ability to actually stop, slow everything down, be in a place of stillness, so that we can actually hear the Holy Spirit as a intimate relationship. It's a voice that only we can really only hear if we are in the stillness of our own presence. And the reason why a lot of us have not been able to create a deep, intimate relationship with this particular supernatural aspect of our being is because we haven't stopped. We haven't been quiet with ourselves. We've been busy distracting ourselves with so many things. We've been looking outside ourselves for a lot of answers. And I believe every single person on the planet can actually have a very close relationship with this aspect that is so loving and so nourishing and so kind that it can pretty much support us through all of life's absolute challenges. And we know that the planet is in a bit of a mess right now, and the more help, the better, right?
Oh yes, absolutely. The world has gone mad. So maybe this is a little secret key for people who find themselves disembodied from their presence, and very much lost in their whole crisis or what's going on, and unable to bring themselves back to the heart and soul of who they are, as a person. So it's almost what I'm hearing you say, and I'm just going to be very objective. I'm not going to impart any of my own thoughts. I may discuss some of my questions with you, but I want to be extremely open and allow people that are listening to make their own informed decision. So it's almost like what you're saying about the Holy Spirit is that it is this, maybe for some people who have never ever come into this opportunity, understanding where they can get their discernment from, how they can heal themselves, how they can connect back in when something is really bad. So is the Holy Spirit a person?
Some would say the Holy Spirit is a person. At the very least, it's a very intimate presence. And I think the way the Holy Spirit likes to operate is as a person, in terms of this ability for us to have a very close relationship. So what often happens in a lot of spiritual teachings is there's an omnipresent creator, and sometimes that creator seems so far away from us and so inaccessible to us, and we are like, oh my God, are you listening? Do you hear me? I'm suffering. But the Holy Spirit is literally a friend in the closest intimate way, who does not abandon you, even if you have to confess some of your darkest and deepest shames, which is what I hear in my clinic all the time, is shameful stories about pelvic health, sexual health, things that people have done and experienced that they might be thinking, I cannot tell another soul. I cannot actually experience the humiliation and shame of this, but I also don't feel I can connect. Well, the Holy Spirit is here to love us and not abandon us, no matter how broken, traumatized, difficult.
No matter what we've done. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a question on that, because, you know, I'm sure that there are women out there suffering, and even men who love their women. Knowing this can be very, very empowering. So take a woman, for example, who is going through a bit of a crisis in their sexuality, you know, through menopause, and maybe they're coming into having problems, because it is a real life problem that women actually almost revert back to, you know, before they had hormones as a child. So they might feel that sex is painful, or, you know, these things that nobody ever wants to talk about. And, you know, we spoke about backstage the element of what happens to a woman's womb being her portal, and things, for example, that may affect her. So, for example, you raised the topic on termination. So, and we are not giving any opinions on right or wrong here. So, just as a disclaimer. So, because we want people that are listening to this to know that the Holy Spirit is unconditional. So it doesn't matter what you've been through, and it doesn't matter what has happened to you. There is no shame from and with the Holy Spirit. So let's talk about a woman who may have encountered sexual assault, or termination, or something that has happened to her, that part of her portal, her womb, and what impact that has. And obviously, because you are a physio and you do actually do the pelvic examination, what have you found? How has that affected women from a spiritual point of view, an emotional point of view, and obviously a practical physical point of view?
Yes, so the interesting thing about pelvic floor physiology and the structures inside the pelvic cauldron, so we have 16 muscle groups inside the area, 16 muscles in particular that are of significance. And when we go through trauma, and this has been well documented and researched, if we go through a trauma, our structural physiological relationship with our nervous system changes in that tissue, and the tissue physiology will store the trauma in the form of either a more rigid or recalcitrant tissue type, or even a tissue type that's gone to sleep. And when we actually so it will absolutely change the physiology of the body, particularly in the pelvis, when there's been something like a termination or a trauma that's been inflicted. And so when we go through menopause, a lot of those very deep unconscious traumas start to surface, and as a result they can really result in a perfect storm, because when our hormones change in menopause, we also have some tissue change to the system due to the loss of estrogen, and that can make the tissue more vulnerable on a physical level anyway. So while we're processing these unconscious traumas that might be surfacing in menopause, our bodies are changing, and our husbands and partners, and whether we're in a same-sex or a heterosexual relationship, will often find it difficult to navigate these changes with us, because as women we don't even know really what we're going through. It's called cougar puberty for a reason. We are in cougar puberty.
Cougar puberty. Oh, well, that's a first. You learn something new every day. That's why I love doing what I'm doing here. So just to kind of bring that back to some of the very key important things. So it sounds like the book that I'm reading at the moment. So I've known about the book for a very long time. The Body Keeps the Score. So all of a sudden, the tissues and the memory of all that trauma held in that part of the woman's body becomes almost like it wakes up and causes these issues of where they have these problems. So, what is the formula of healing for that? What do you do typically when you know a woman has gone through that kind of a trauma in her body?
Yes. So, of course, being a physiotherapist and a sexual and pelvic health educator, my scope of practice is really in the tending and befriending physically to the tissues that we might see have made those changes, by actually directing a woman's attention to those tissues with our hands-on medicine. So I'm a very hands-on therapist, and my manual skills around actually reading what's happening in a female system will support that woman's awareness around how to actually relax a muscle group that she might not have accessed inside the pelvic cauldron her whole life. For whatever reason, women abandon this part of their bodies, often due to trauma or sometimes due to spiritual conditioning. And my job is to bring awareness to the tissue with my hands first and foremost. And then we use a lot of verbal and manual cues in my clinic to support the release of that story in the tissue. Now, I do again want to just talk to scope of practice, because if I can get a really good physical release in tissue that might be holding a lot of tension or scarring, and that would mean that I'm placing either gentle stretching pressure to the area or asking a woman to gently activate a particular area of tissue and then release it again with support, with me as her witness, I'm actually focusing a lot on the physical benefits of that practice. Those physical benefits include better comfort with sex, better continence levels. A lot of women find they have continence issues and prolapse issues as they go through menopause. But there is also a deeper spiritual, mental, and emotional awakening occurring in the templates behind that physical input. So because, again, with scope of practice, we focus primarily on the physical. My job is also to support that woman if she is going through a major realization that her body has shut down for some reason and she needs to actually have therapeutic intervention that is very, very specialized to that trauma. I then key her in with my sexologist, my favorite referring party, a sexologist who has also been medically trained, or a psychologist, usually to do some EMDR therapy. And of course, in my clinic, I hold a very safe, non-judgmental presence. And I believe there's something more at work in these sessions. I believe that the simple practice of being very, very present in the body in some of our more personal spaces, because I'm doing a lot of internal vaginal examinations, also facilitates a deep sense of safety. So felt safety is something that supports the processing of trauma to a subconscious level, where some women may not even remember what it was that planted the physiological imbalance in the first place. You know, a lot of women have spent their whole lives avoiding the discussions around abortion, sexual abuse. Some women don't even remember their childhood sexual abuse, but that's not the relevancy of it. So the story isn't necessarily always relevant. What is relevant, though, is that there's often an emotional release, and I have to have at least 6 boxes of tissues ready in my clinic, for the week ahead, because we go through a lot of tears, and the tears are, I believe, the Holy Spirit's way of releasing that trauma in a way that's very healing and supportive of the nervous system to down train itself into a regulated space. So we can't really access trauma when we're up in our anxious breath and we're, really moving our physiology away from that part of our bodies. When we think about being so busy, we're breathing up, breathing into our head, overthinking. If we bring our awareness down into the body, our breath becomes more abdominally focused and pelvic focused. We're then able to also bring our nervous system into a space where it is actually safe to start processing some of those things that are shielding us from living the sensations of divinity, sensuality, grace, the pleasant blessings of this world that, we've somehow denied ourselves for whatever reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't mention that you're going to do a closing ceremony with a feminine shift and activation visualization. It's just going to be for a few minutes, but it's going to be very, very powerful. So ladies, if you feel, and even men, I believe it's going to be very empowering for you to understand about, if your partner is going through these kinds of elements, that, you can be all the more empowered by understanding and knowing that there is literally, no pun intended, light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. And, it's so interesting too that, you talk about the Holy Spirit. You talk about this, incredible portal of healing through the womb, and co-creation and procreation, and the difference of, when we're in that procreating state, and then we kind of move over to the co-creating state. Would you like to explore and open that up? I guess with the knowledge too that you yourself have been through some very significant emotional events. You've been through a dark night of the soul, and happened in your 20s. And you've also been through postnatal depression, which I can actually relate to everything you're talking about. And so many people think that they're being derailed from, what they're supposed to be doing in life, and they can't do it, and they become paralyzed because they feel so taken off track by what they're, what's happened to them. But you talk about this in a full cycle of how that derailing may have begun that way, but how it also changes to bring them back into their soul purpose. Would you like to enlighten our listeners?
Yes, absolutely. So the idea of us moving through these cycles in our life where things are sometimes so desperately dark for us that we're experiencing a dark night of the soul. First of all, with the menopausal shift that can often be very much characterized by depression and by a dark night of the soul, there's this concept of being procreative and being wrapped up in our menstrual cycle for our whole lives, followed by a period where our hormones change enough for us to then be off the cyclic wheel, but into this winding down of our drivers and our estrogen that used to enliven us into productivity. That was a concept coined, and I do need to give credit to Barbara Marx Hubbard, who was a very, very enlightened, supportive spiritual teacher of the women's mysteries. She passed away a few years ago now. When we go into these dark places, when we have these experiences, you're absolutely right that the interpretation can be that we're off track. But I believe that we can't come into the oil of our anointment. We can't have the luxury of our essence, our life essence, being almost distilled and supported into its potency, unless we've been pressed into a particular life challenge that has generally been in our divine plan all along. So what we need to sometimes reframe for ourselves is, oh, I did this and life gave me that. Or I thought this and life gave me that. The truth, I believe, is that we have a plan that has actually been known to the Holy Spirit and to the divine creator all along. That plan is quite a gloriously wonderful one. But when we see these isolated life events and we personalize the fact that they're showing us that we're off track somehow, what we're missing is that there's always a blessing inside that particular dark night that literally, if we go deep enough, that deep dive allows us to go into some unconscious traumas and some unconscious aspects of our selfhood that we need to find in order to bring back the oil of our anointment in a more potent form. So when we can't actually bring that oil into its fullest potency unless it's been pressed like a rose petal, and we know, rose oil's very exquisite, expensive oil. It needs to be crushed down. Pride, distraction, perhaps lack of our insight, a lot of things that humans have that derail their ability to be humble, their ability to receive the messages of the Spirit. That is where we don't realize we're looking for all of these answers, not realizing that it's basically attempting to reach us. It's attempting to send its messaging to us through these experiences. And those experiences have been set out for us before we even took our human form. It was a contract we decided to embark on. And those soul contracts, those covenants that we've agreed to, we can go into them kicking and screaming. We can go into them going, oh, poor me. Self-pity was my specialty. Self-pity was a really big one for me. Actually, self-pity takes us so far away from the powerful gratitude and grace of that experience. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying we can't be superhuman in the sense that, of course, we're going to have feelings about things. We're going to go through grief. We're going to shed tears. But those tears are actually, each tear that we shed is being witnessed as a way for the divinity to press into us and continuously soften us and guide us. Because if we didn't, we would be hardened to it. Yeah, we wouldn't be able to hear it. We would have a very unfulfilling existence. And I believe some of us are having perhaps less fulfilling existences than what we could have. This is about us enjoying the blessings that life has. And that joyousness is there even in the most difficult circumstances. So that's where we know the Holy Spirit's actually at its peak, is when we're on the floor, we've considered suicide because things have gotten that bad. And there's a strange but eerie reassurance and sense of peace and sense of righteousness and alignment that says, actually, this was always going to be. This was always going to happen. We signed up for this somehow. This was always in the plan. And there's something really comforting about that, because I think we give ourselves a hard time, right? We think we're in charge. We think we're God. We create all these manifestation practices. I don't believe it's good for us in a way.
And just hearing that right there is just so soul freeing in itself. To know that, like, you went through your own existential crisis. And you talked about you know, that part where we hear so many tragic stories of people who do take that step that enlivens themselves. And, you know, you went through that grief, that dark night of the soul yourself. Do you feel that if people come to know the awareness, like, I mean, for people that are loved ones and they've lost, it's kind of comforting to know that, you know, that was their path and that was their, and because so many people blame themselves, you know, if something bad happens to a loved one or to themselves, they'll look internally to blame and connect themselves to it. Where I can see that from that point of view, it's very much, well, this is their path, not yours. And then for people that obviously come to understand, say, for example, which is a question, by the way, the Holy Spirit, and they are in that, you know, very dark place. You believe them coming into that knowledge of something far bigger and greater can actually change things and turn things around?
I do, but there's a really important part of this that I didn't get until a year ago when I had my third major life crisis, and I couldn't help but ask the question, why, what aren't I getting? You know, what aren't I understanding about this? I feel like I'm a good person. I feel like I try to do all the right things. I try to help people, and still my partner leaves me in my year of menopause and he runs off with a 32-year-old, and I'm like, there's something I'm not getting right about this life, you know, and I need to know, because I'm losing hope that at the age of 52 I'm ever going to get it. And if this is what my life looks like, I just don't really think I'm that happy. You know, I'm living for everyone else. I'm living for my sons and my family, but I'm not really here to do anything in particular, and that's it for me. You know, I'm a lost cause. That's really where I was a year ago in this heartbreak. And
just a year ago.
A year ago.
Wow.
A year ago.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been 13 months this month.
Wow, that's very fresh.
Yeah, it was a huge turnaround because of this one thing, which I believe was the difference, and that was that I had not completely surrendered everything. Like, I still, in every part of my life, I was still praying for things to go my way. I was still praying for this to happen, for that to happen, for him to come back, for him not to leave me, whatever. I wanted to push my will force energy over the life force energy that was going to give me all the blessings. And I wanted to know better than what the Holy Spirit wanted for me. I wanted to know better than the Holy Spirit. I wanted to superimpose my will force energy on that current of life. And I was trying to and push, and I was like exhausted, and I wondered, why am I continuously feeling tired? And until I got on my knees and I literally said, okay, you can have it all. I'm yours. I'm yours. I am fully yours. I don't want to have anything for me. I want this to be for us to relate. You are my one and only source of guidance. What the world has conditioned me to want, I no longer want. I don't care if I'm poor and homeless. You do with me what you need to do. I'm a piece of clay right now. I'm mud. I'm dust. And everything started to change. And It felt like, for me, I have been given the biggest gift, that it would be almost criminal. It would be not right to not share that particular part of the journey, which is where we can be so broken, but there's still a little part of us that doesn't want to give that last little part away. It could be shame that's stopping us from wanting to be seen by this intimate friendship with divinity, because some of us have been brought up to believe that divinity doesn't like the dark parts of us. And, you know, we've been taught to be ashamed of aspects that, in a way, if we were just to be like, I'm going to have the best friend I've ever had in this relationship with divinity, and I'm going to tell divinity everything about myself. I'm going to tell divinity that I haven't wanted to be here. I haven't wanted to admit that to my relationship with the Holy Spirit before, you know, and I'm just going to lay it out every day. We're going to have conversations about this. Yeah. And I'm not going to either. I'm also not going to have an agenda where I'm hoping to get something out of this. This isn't what I'm doing. I'm surrendering myself as a portal or a vessel, and that vessel is completely empty. And I think in the emptiness, that's what scares people the most, is in the emptiness. It's a void that people spend their whole life avoiding, not realizing that they're actually avoiding the blessings. Yeah.
It's interesting. That's very interesting, because in one of the techniques that I practice, we go back to that void. We go back to before time. We go back to before ancestral lineage, and we go back into a space and a place of absolute nothingness, where there is nothing but love and light, and you know, and then it becomes everything, because there is no meaning, there's no judge, there's no anything. So it's interesting you talk about that, and that kind of leads me to, you know, just sort of prefacing this with, you know, backstage, you know, I asked you the question, is the Holy Spirit a man or a woman? And I thought for Christians that could be a really clickbait kind of a title, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, what you did say, which made so much sense to me, it's a bit like going back to the void again, going back to that nothingness, and that is that there's no gender. So, you know, because then that would be limiting, I guess. So when you answered that, I thought, well, it makes sense. No matter, even if I did believe it was a male or a man, and it came from Jesus, and Jesus historically was a man, the simple fact is that we are placing a limit by saying the Holy Spirit is a man. So you talk about it in a non-gendered, and you also talk about the pranic life force energy and the breath behind the breath. Maybe we can, I know you'll be bringing this into maybe the meditation we're going to do, but can you talk about how the Holy Spirit becomes that limitless midwife, shepherd, and ability to be limitlessly rebirthing us?
Yes, and that's an interesting, and that's a beautiful question too, about how it becomes a limitless part of us, because that's also where our humility as humans is so important. Because the biggest mistake we can make in understanding that the Holy Spirit's working through us is to take some kind of ownership and put some kind of title over ourselves and call it, you know, being a guru or whatever it is that we see our languaging around it doing. And I actually believe right now the Holy Spirit's showing up more and more to balance out this idea of the masculine and the feminine energies. So when we're bringing that supportive midwifing, I'll call it, into this world right now, a lot of women are waking up to the idea of re-languaging some of the ideas around how this operates in our bodies as females, because a lot of that's been left out of the religious texts that are so informative and so truthful, you know. And so there's a need right now, I believe, for us to have and share our lived experiences of how it actually communicates to us. I believe it communicates to us deep in our bones as women. And again, it requires us to have a lot of stillness and a lot of presence. And it also requires us to be so humble, because the minute our mind and the narratives and the conditioning wants to step in and muddy the waters, we can actually get derailed pretty quickly. But the other thing that's going on right now, which is really important to mention, is that a lot of this is being hijacked and targeted by a degree of spiritual warfare that's occurring on the planet. So when we come into this more, we come into this more like this frequency of understanding that our alignment comes from that place of complete surrender to this force. We will be tested. Yeah, we will be asked and shown temptations, I guess you could say, derailments. There will be people in the form of very angelic messengers, coming through people to tell us how to go next. But there will also be people actually working against us, because it's hard for humans to understand how powerful this particular ability to surrender is. So we will trigger people when we're actually operating in this space. Yeah, it will be very, very triggering to people. And I think sometimes that can be misconstrued as, oh, I must be doing the wrong thing. I'm usually such a nice person. I don't like making people, not like me. But what menopause I think the way menopause changes you is it stops you from feeling like you have to worry about what other humans think anymore. And you're a lot more capable of receiving those messages about what the Holy Spirit wants to do through you. And God may care if it's really up to you and God what you do with your life from this point onwards. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm going to bring you around now. I mean, I could have this conversation forever, actually, and there's so many conversations within it that I believe we need to open up on, definitely on a whole different level. But I know that I'm excited about what you're going to be bringing here to the meditation. So yeah, I guess firstly, just to kind of bring a foundation here. Our audience, I guess they may be dealing with shame. They could be dealing with those issues that now that they've listened to Lisa and listened to so many gold nuggets, that it may bring that awareness to you that just in that self is so freeing. And, I guess the rest is really up to you to allow yourself to have that divine relationship with something that's higher than you, a higher power. So I'm really loving what you've talked about. And I know you're very big on the embodiment and the fact that we do get disembodied. And that happens to all of us when we become, disgruntled, challenged, or whatever that happens. So in all of this, I'm wondering if, because we didn't prepare anything around this, what you like to bring, what you feel is going to be, innately what you believe is going to be appropriate to bring to our audience.
Yes, I would absolutely love to work with the imprint, the visualization of rose medicine. So the rose is a really significant symbol of the divine feminine awakening, and the softness and the anointment that we all bring as women. And if you don't think your life matters, or you don't feel that you're awake to what your life purpose is, the rose is a really beautiful meditation I'd like to offer that will support women to not only come into their deeper nature so that they can better tune into that intuitive faculty that is where the interface between themselves and the conversation with the Holy Spirit around, okay, where do I go next? What are my next steps? Yeah. But also in the softening of our physiology so that we can actually access those deeper parts of ourselves and stay.
Beautiful. So just a question, do we have to ask the audience to be in a place where they do not require concentration for this, or is it okay for them to be, driving a car, or,
Thank you for asking that. Yeah. Ideally, I would ask the audience if they could please start to turn any devices or distractions off. If you are driving and you need to pull over or stop the recording to listen to this at another time, that would be ideal. Because what we will also be looking at doing is taking a comfortable seat so that we can actually receive the impressions of the seated position into our pelvis as well. So if you're not already sitting, please take a comfortable seat. And please start to, if you feel comfortable to do this, either soften the gaze at a point down in front of you or close the eyes if you feel comfortable to close the eyes. And start to bring your awareness down into the body. Noticing the breath as well, cool as you inhale. And warm as you exhale, and our awareness travels deep, deep down to the pelvis right now. And we're tracing the points of the pelvis that connect with the chair. The pubic bone is at the front. The sitting bones are on the left and right sides, and the tailbone is at the back of the body. And these bony points form a perfect diamond shape. We're tracing that diamond shape with our mind's eye, and we're allowing the breath to travel all the way down to this diamond shape known as our perineal diamond. And in the center of the diamond, we rest our awareness, and it's a visual awareness where we place the symbol of the red rose. It's a very Mary Magdalene symbol that enables us to start to tune into a particular frequency in our bodies that allows us to soften. And what we're going to do right now with the rose is we're going to train the rose to open completely on our inhalation, so that on the inhalation of the breath, we're noticing the petals of the rose softening and opening in our mind's eye. And as we do that, we may even notice the diamond shape around the rose also softening and expanding slightly. And the physiology of our pelvis relaxes into the chair. As we exhale, we're going to release any tension from the body like black smoke through the nostrils. So just for the next 3 breaths, we inhale and soften the diamond shape. We soften and open the petals of the rose. We see the impression. And as we exhale, we release any tension from that area like black smoke through the nostrils. Softening on the inhale and releasing on the exhale for one more long, soft breath. And then we're bringing all of our awareness now to the rose itself, so that as we inhale and soften, we're noticing this sense of expansion in the base of the pelvis. And as we exhale, we notice the rose slightly closing. And you may even feel the tissue or the muscles or the physiology of the pelvic floor area slightly hugging the rose into more of a bud-like shape on your exhalation phase of the breath. And we're going to do 5 rose breaths now, so that on the inhale, as the pelvic floor and the perineal diamond and the rose softens into full bloom, there's a sense of opening. And on the exhale, as we draw and gently move the rose into more of a bud-shaped sensation, the pelvic floor physiology lightly hugs towards the body. On the inhale, the pelvic floor softens and relaxes and releases. And on the exhale, we have a light and gentle hug and lift of the muscles, and the visualization of the rose shows us this beautiful sense of support to closing into that bud-like shape. And we're doing 3 more breaths at our own pace, supporting this idea that as we open and soften, we're coming into this fully supported, nourished place. And as we exhale, we have a recoil, a sense of release to allow ourselves to have the healthy boundaries around our bodies, so that we know when to open and when to say no. We know when to invite, and we know when to create this permeable boundary, this supportive sense in ourselves. And just taking 1 more breath and letting the whole visualization of the rose gently fade. So that for a moment, we're left with the essence of the breath traveling deep into the body. And we're left with the awareness of being able to stay with ourselves in full and complete presence in this part of our body. And we also know that in calling forward this Magdalene, or this beautiful feminine energy, that Mary Magdalene was really supportive, and she was incredibly misunderstood. But she was absolutely powerful in her support of Jesus Christ in his life, and she financed him. She was powerful. She was able to move heaven and earth to allow for the experience of the entire resurrection process, so that no matter how surrendered we become as humans, no matter how deep the crucifixion, I guess, is, the stigmata is, the gift of this resurrection is always possible, and even better and brighter and more beautiful and more in blossom than ever before. And when you're ready, bring your awareness back into towards the heart. Just take a moment to give gratitude for the space that you've created around reconnecting to self and to Holy Spirit. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back to the room and feel yourself being completely aware of your surroundings. Please don't start your car yet unless you've had a few breaths and a moment to do that.
Yes, just come back in, come back to full alertness. And oh my gosh, Lisa, that was incredible. I will be definitely listening to that. And I'd even love to share it into my paid program for my people that come into the community. I think that was just powerful. So I just want to thank you so much. And we only touched the surface today. And, you know,
we did.
I just really want to say that this is a conversation we definitely need to come back to the table with. And
I agree.
we will have Lisa's very unique and powerful and yet profoundly knowledgeable services of how you can get in contact with this lovely lady. They will be in the show notes. So you can contact her directly. You can follow her on social media. If you are fortunate enough to be in the same city as Lisa, then you can have that very powerful experience. And now I understand, because a lot of the mentors and coaches have talked about this kind of, they call it a massage, where it is in that part, in that region of the body. Now I know so much more. So Lisa, what part of the world are you in? So for those who are in your city, they may be able to know they can come into your clinic.
Yeah, sure. So I practice out of my little clinic in Bangalore on Mondays and Wednesdays, and I'm in Ballina also, which is the north coast of New South Wales. I'm very happy to do telehealth calls, although of course that omits the hands-on experience, but there's a lot we can also address in telehealth online calls. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to connect with you, Terri. Thank you for facilitating all of that so beautifully.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Sending you so much love and enjoy, and we will see you on the next episode of Terri Messenger's Genius Zone.